Hello and welcome to today's In Conversation session, asking and hopefully answering if gender balance in the workplace matters. I'm Liz Mayers, the co-founder of EDI Accreditation. We're a bit like an ISO certification for equality, diversity and inclusion, and accredited measures EDI performance, provides a kite mark of achievement and encourages best EDI practice in the long term. I'm delighted to be joined by a brilliant panel today. Extra special thanks to Tarrah, who's joining us despite having had emergency dental procedure today that's left her in lots of pain, a little bit numb. I'm absolutely loving your commitment to being here. So panel, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, let's start with the wonderful Tarrah.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, by the way, for inviting me. The reason I fought through the pain and the numbness is because I think this is such an important topic and one that naturally is very close to my heart and is something I'm constantly talking about. So I wanted to make sure that even though I can't feel my mouth right now, that I was still here. So thank you so much for the invite. So I'm Tarrah Nhari. I am the co-founder and the CEO of Tamwe, where we basically are what I would say like the Fiverr of Africa. We are a freelancer marketplace, but we focus on African freelancers as well as refugee and displaced freelancers through one of our partners. And yeah, I'm so happy to be here. The world of diversity, the world of employment, all of that is like my meat and potatoes, as I call it. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much. And new to the community and the panel, we have Susan.
Hello, I'm Susan. That's Susan Popoola. I'm the founder of Mosaic Fusions, with a focus on supporting leaders and their teams in navigating the complexity of the workplace and the wider world that we're living in. And that obviously includes inclusion. And I'm really glad to be here today specifically for the topic of gender balance, especially as I spoke to a number of men for a book around that, male perspectives on the value of women at work.
Amazing, thank you, Susan. And last but definitely not least, familiar face, we have the wonderful Gemma.
Hello, thank you so much. I obviously didn't do anything too bad last time. Thank you for having me back again. So I'm Gemma Rabbini and I run Coach and Bloom, which is set up specifically to help businesses retain and empower their female talent. So working with interventions around maternity return, navigating menopause, but also just those sticky moments that we all have in our lives where we just have a crisis of identity, a confidence dip, and just my fundamental belief is that women should build lives they love and careers that they can be really proud of. So that is what I do. Feel very privileged to work in this space with amazing women. So thanks for having me.
Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. Right, so let's get straight into it then. We know there are lots of industries and jobs that are very male dominated, things like technology, construction, financial services, engineering. And then there are also female dominated industries like healthcare, education, childcare, social work. Interestingly though, even in female dominated industries, the number of top jobs held by men is disproportionate to the number of men in the sector. So for example, 74% of teachers are female, but only 36% of secondary school head teachers are women. In primary teaching, only 15.5% of teachers are male, and yet almost double that, 28% of primary head teachers are male, which has never sat quite right with me. But so today, should we just accept that there are pink jobs and blue jobs? Maybe some things that men or women are just better at? Who's going to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. So this is a very interesting question specifically because I don't think we can run away from exactly what you've said, that, there's some roles that naturally women will be more inclined to do, and then there's some roles, I guess, that men will naturally be more inclined to do. However, I find that sometimes that's used too much as an excuse to not actually be more intentional when we are now hiring for those quote unquote male jobs. I don't really believe that there's anything that like in a job that a male has that a woman wouldn't be able to do. So it's an interesting conversation, because obviously we do see that these are the things that are naturally happening. And the interesting thing, like you said, is the fact that even within these so-called pink jobs, we have men that are still leading them. I think that's where we actually see that it is being used as an excuse, because if the majority of the people that are doing the everyday work, not in the leadership, are women, surely you want leadership that understands that particular role in a very specific, nuanced, and experienced type of way. So again, I think it's used as an excuse to just be like, well, naturally women are more caring, so there's going to be more nurses, naturally women are more caring, so there's going to be more teachers. Okay, that's fine. But then why isn't that represented in the leadership then? Why isn't it that the people that are making the decisions of what these roles look like or what they do, why isn't that done by a woman then? So yes and no in regards to, do we just naturally think that some jobs are pink and some jobs are blue, I guess would be the opposite of a pink job. And it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then let's show that within the leadership as well. Otherwise, it's just an excuse that we're making to keep basically that segregation, and to keep us from making the intentional like decisions to basically bring those women into those other upper level roles within those industries.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that. Love that. I think society has quite a lot to answer for. And I love what you said, Tarrah, because when you think about how we talk to young girls and boys about what their options are and what sort of skills they have, even if you listen to the language that we use, you stand, not in a weird way, but stand in a playground and listen to how we talk to girls and boys about what they're doing, how they're achieving something, how they should be playing. And what you said about kind of, the nurturing side, women potentially seen as more nurturing. When you listen to the language that we use, you're climbing a tree, be careful, don't step on people's fingers, help people up, don't, make sure everyone's okay, so and so is upset. And then you hear them talking to boys doing exactly the same activity, and it's like, well done, how high can you get, where, wow, can you touch that branch, that's amazing, like, look how quickly you did that, well done on your achievement. And I think actually there's something really interesting about how we as grown-ups define pink, blue, green, like whatever color, whatever colors we choose, and how we talk to girls and boys about what the expectations are and what the limits are, e.g. there should be none, on their ambition, and whether there's something really interesting in there about how we define leadership and what you just talked about in terms of the, up to a certain level, we can sort of, we've got the pink jobs being done, but actually when it gets to a certain leadership level, suddenly now that becomes a blue thing, like that's a blue job or whatever, that some man has to step in. And actually pink leaders or female leaders are actually almost sometimes better, more empathetic. They have a different leadership style. So yeah, I think it's such an interesting question.
Yeah, and it's funny, as you were talking, when you said pink and blue leaders, I mean, it sort of irked me, because for me that's even problematic in of itself.
And that's why
my favorite color is purple.
That way.
Yeah, my favorite color is purple, and as opposed to pink. And I don't think you'd find any pink around me. And you probably would see more of blue, because we all have masculine and feminine traits. And so, as you said, there is a lot to say as to how we define girls and boys and how we nurture and bring them up. And I'll never forget. There's an advert that was on telly a number of years back. I don't know whether anyone will remember it. It was for baby food. And so they showed a baby girl and a baby boy, pink, blue. and they show the girl as a ballerine. So it's the first, I mean, so they show her as a ballerine, and then they show the boy as an engineer, and they show him climbing mountains. So just to reiterate that point, and even when we think we don't do it, we do it to our children. It's the messaging that we give to them. And I think it follows through, even if in a family we say we treat them the same. What happens when they go to school and the world around us? We don't have men here, so I sort of speak in terms of having spoken to a number of different men. And when I was doing research for my book, I spoke to the youngest person I spoke to was 16. And he spoke about coming from a family whereby both his mother and his father worked. In fact, they worked for the same company, similar roles, so they had that parity that he could see. But he said that when he goes out to school, that the boys were given a message that they need to be strong and they shouldn't show any emotion other than anger. And the girls, it was like, you're supposed to be clever, but not clever enough to show the boys up. And all of those messaging, those things that you spoke about. And I'll stop talking after this. Just linking back into that whole thing about the roles that we feel and the messaging that it gives to young people and everyone else is what I've noticed and become really apparent of. If you look at education at nursery level, as you said, Liz, most of the teachers and most of the people around are female. Primary school, predominantly female, except when you get to the headship, the senior roles. But as you get higher up, seniors to secondary school and university, you have more men. So we're even within that space. And if we look around the world around us, we're sending out almost a subliminal message, even if we don't realize it, that ladies, girls, your role is to nurture and support. It's in textbooks and everything else as well. But men, your role is to lead, to be in that position, whether you want to or not. And I'll just conclude my thoughts for now in that for me, it's not so much balance, but it's the fact that everyone should be given the opportunity to live to their full value and be what they want to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember when I was pregnant and going back to sort of societal expectations and things, I was assigned to a male midwife, and my mum was horrified. She was just like, oh, how can a man be a midwife? What can he possibly know about childbirth and pregnancy and things? And I was like, well, actually, what it tells me is against all odds, he's fought to be in that position. And he really, really wants to do it. And actually, on our first appointment, he said to me, you're probably wondering why I'm a midwife, because I'm quite unusual. And he told me a story about when he was 14 years of age, he had a much older sister who was pregnant, and they were at home alone one evening, and she went into labour, very quick, very unexpected. And he ended up at 14 years of age delivering her baby on the bathroom floor.
Oh, wow.
And he said it was just the most magical experience he'd ever had. It was so life-changing for him that he was like, this has happened for a reason. This is my career path. And he was absolutely amazing. Really sadly for me, midway through my pregnancy, he relocated and moved to a different area. So I then had a female midwife. She'd never had children, never been pregnant. And so all those arguments that my mum used about, what can he possibly know about the experience of being pregnant? The female midwife didn't have it either. She was doing the same. She was doing it from a textbook and from the theory and from all the years of education that she had to qualify her for that job. But my mum didn't for a minute question why she was doing that job. So I find that really, really fascinating. But
I love that example as well. And the reason I'm even so against so-called pink or blue or whatever, like, given a job agenda is because my whole life, even when we're not talking about jobs specifically, I've been what's like what people would call a tomboy, like from a very, very young age. Like I remember even in like nursery or kindergarten, depending on what you call it, like my two best friends were boys. I remember them. I even remember when I lost my first tooth was because one of the boys convinced me to do some boyish thing about, oh yeah, if you do this, like it was something ridiculous. And that's how I lost my first tooth. But even like moving on, I remember when I wanted to learn an instrument and I was telling people, oh yeah, I really want to learn the drums. And I genuinely had a guy say to me, you know, drums are for, like literally somebody said to me, you know, drums are for boys, right? Like, why don't you learn how to play the piano or something that's more ladylike? And that just spurred me on more to be like, well, now I'm doubling down on the drums because you've decided, like, because I'm a girl, that, you know, drums are not for me. And then even later on, like, I played rugby for uni. Like, I've always been this woman that's in spaces that are meant for men. And therefore, I think that's why, like, that question always has my backup, because I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what is it that's on a man that I like, that I don't have, that I can't do a particular job or you know, gain a particular skill in something? My whole life has been proving that type of thing wrong. So yeah, it's I love that example you just gave with the midwife of, actually you had this biased thought about this person, but if we're actually looking at who was more qualified to do what, who had more experience and could actually understand more, look, it's the person that you least expected. So yeah, no, I absolutely love that story because it completely resonates.
Well, I think that's the problem with any of these stereotypes, isn't it? It's so limiting, because what you're doing is you're excluding anybody from doing something if it doesn't meet that societal norm or that expectation. And I think that can be really damaging for both genders, both way round. So why do we think gender balance is particularly important in the workplace then?
I'm not even going to say gender balance. I'm going to say inclusion, giving people the opportunity. There's the case, I think it is in Norway or country in that area of the where there was the policy to include about inclusion of women and that whole thing of balance with quotas in like sectors like construction. Don't quote me on the specifics, but the key is that it was the big push to say we have to have that balance or that equity, however you describe that, whether it's 50-50, 40-60 or what have you. And women didn't take it up. Now, there might be deeper reasons why they didn't take it up, but I think that's okay. The important thing for me is that they had the opportunity. There was the barriers are hopefully removed so they could take on those roles in construction and those areas that were traditionally occupied by men. But the key is to have as many women who are willing and capable in those roles as men and vice versa, because you get we have different ways of thinking in broad way terms. There are always exceptions, but the way we're nurtured, if nothing else, means that we think differently. We bring different skills, capabilities, and ways of navigating. And if you lack that inclusion, you miss out on that richness and that the different ways of thinking. But when you have an inclusive environment, especially when you drill down to the intersectionality of different types of men and different types of women with all their rich experiences and perspectives of the world, then you get the best possible input, ideas, thinking, skill sets and outcomes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just think it's such an interesting thing that a lot of the time diversity, whether it's gender diversity or just inclusion generally, is seen as something to slow you down. You know, it's a tick box thing and it's a bit, oh great, you know, we can't get the best person, we're just going to have some, you know. But actually diversity is a strategically important thing for businesses. When you look at the research, there's so much out there around improved levels of innovation, better, faster problem solving, better profit, like 19% increased profits, like from companies like Deloitte and from, Forbes, and from like there's higher engagement. But actually it's good for business. And because my background previous to this is in customer experience, there's a huge amount of data that says that when you have a diverse, particularly senior team, making different decisions, challenging each other, making really robust perspectives known, you are better able to design products that are suitable for a diverse audience, world, customer group. Right? We can't change the diversity that's in the world, but if we live in our ivory towers and we never have differences of opinion, and it's just this group think, Bay of Pigs kind of sort of just, let's all agree, we all come from the same lived experience, you never get any of that amazing innovation, and you never design products or services that really resonate with a diverse world. So I just think it's vital to your question, to not have diversity means that you haven't got a future-proof business.
Interestingly, the International Labour Organization said that companies with diverse leadership teams, and this research was particularly around gender diversity, said that with mixed teams, they're 35% better able to gauge consumer interest and demand. They are 59% greater in terms of innovation and openness, and improve productivity by 63%. So, all the way across, whether you're looking at that connecting with your consumers and your customers, you're not just selling to men, and you're not just selling to women. There are very few products, services, solutions that we sell that are exclusively made for one market, and yet quite often it's an exclusive group that is trying to design and innovate in those areas. So
I even went ahead. Oh, sorry,
tiny point. There's a statistic which is about the proportion of decisions that are made by women in a consumer environment. It's something scary, like 70 to 80% of consumer decisions are of family spending, of holiday, of loads of stuff, are made by women. So actually, if you don't design for women, you design for no one, because they might even be buying the razors or the whatever the men want to get. So just wanted to make that point around your consumers are probably majority women. Even car purchases, I had the final sign off on the car. It was kind of, if I didn't like it, it's not going to be a thing.
But I would say with that, I'd bring in the balance and the harmony, because if you think about the car, if we use those gender stereotypes, the man in the house is more likely, and this is a broad generalization, he's more likely to think of the performance of the car. Now, as I said, I'm generalizing because some women are superb at understanding engineering and how vehicles work. But a man is typically more likely to sit down and look at the performance of the car. And while the female might be having the final sign off on the design. And so even within that, from that perspective, you're taking account of almost the two key genders, the two different perspectives on things. But you're also, if we use the example of cars, you're making sure that it works for a female, because there is that whole thing about things being designed around men without taking account of females. So if you have a female in the team, even if the man is just going to go out and buy the car without consulting because he's buying it as a gift for a lady, you still have to take account on what will work for a woman as well.
Yeah, so the point I was going to make is pretty much like everything that you guys have said. And even going down to, I know a lot of people, a lot of the time, especially when we see what's going on, with like the Trump-Musk administration and them like blanket basically destroying all the DI and inclusion stuff that was going on. I know a lot of the times it's down to people wanting to know the bottom line, and they don't care about all of this other stuff, they just care about profit. So I wanted to make sure, so I wrote some stats down, and some of them are ones that you've already said. But like stuff like 85% of business leaders agree that a diverse workforce is essential for like fostering those unique perspectives and fresh ideas to drive innovation. So I think that's the figure you were looking for there, is it's 85%. And companies with a greater than 30% like female executives tend to outperform those with fewer female executives. And 45% of diverse teams are more likely to grow in market share, and 70% more likely to capture new market growth. 70%. These figures are not like small little, oh yeah, well, if you do this, you know, you'll get like a 1% increase or whatever. Like studies keep showing that teams that have like more female leadership outperform, like consistently outperform teams that don't. So for me, my argument is always, okay, forget everything else. Maybe you don't care about equality and you don't care about all of this stuff. If all you care about is money, is your profits, is your bottom line, then you're making the completely incorrect decision by leaving us out, because hello, we will make you more money. So for me, there's no actual argument that has ever made sense to me. People are like, oh, it should be on merit. Yes, we know. We're also saying the same thing. It should be on this. It's like, yes, we're all saying the same thing. You've just decided for some reason that because somebody's a woman, they're less than. Even when we look at like the statistics around like STEM, we have like a higher percentage of women that are doing STEM courses. I think it's something like 50, it's either 52 or 57%. And these figures are like for North Africa and like the Middle East specifically. I've been doing a lot of research on African stuff, but like these figures like keep showing that these arguments are old and they're tired and they literally don't make sense when you're actually looking at the fact and the figures. It's just a no-brainer, to be honest.
Yeah. Another really quick real life example for me as well was mentioned to me after COVID, and it was a consulting firm. They had one female partner, and the partner's job was to generate revenue, and they all had targets and revenue streams. And COVID hit, lockdown hit, and all the men's new business figures went through the floor. The women's was going like this. Can anyone guess why?
I suspect it probably comes down to the engagement, the conversations, and how they stayed in touch and continued to interact in a different way from which a lot of men would do, which was probably more focused on the process than the engagement. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely spot on. The golf courses were shut. The male partners did 95% of their business on the golf course.
Interesting.
Remove the golf course, and they were having to rely on consistent business development techniques that the female partner had been using all along, because she didn't do business on the golf course. And so actually, when those circumstances changed, it impacted the team performance, because great, have people that can do business on the golf course, but also have people that do business elsewhere. And I just thought that was a really, for me, it was a really visual way of going, oh God, yeah, that's why this diversity stuff is important, because you've got people doing the same task, doing the same job, but doing it very differently and approaching it differently. And so different things are going to work for different customers.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you, as someone, especially as someone that plays golf myself, I like the fact that you didn't say that the business done on the golf course is not important or value, that it's not an or, but it's an and.
Absolutely, absolutely. That I think is one of the big challenges when you have conversations about diversity, as you touched on earlier. It's not about an either or. It's not about push any underrepresented group forward at the expense of success. It's include every underrepresented group so that you can be even more successful.
It's the added value.
Yeah, completely. So understanding how diversity in all aspects, including gender, makes for much more successful, productive, innovative teams and profitable businesses. Why do we think some industries are slower to address this than others?
There's quite a lot of vulnerability in this area, I think, because, and I am not a man, I can't speak for men, but I think if you are in an environment that is comfortable, that is surrounded by people who look like you, who sound like you, who validate your views, and someone encourages you to, we need more diversity, we need more difference, it can be quite them and us. It can be kind of, well, I'm going to lose opportunities, I'm going to bring people in, and people can get quite territorial, quite nervous. Also, it's quite an interesting area and where you can expose yourself with what you don't know. And I think I find that a lot when I talk to particularly senior men in businesses. They kind of say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to not offend people. I don't know how to, I don't really know how to navigate this stuff. And that makes them feel uncomfortable. And they're used to being at the top of their game and knowing their stuff and being respected and being a professional and being looked to for the answers. And I think sometimes it comes from quite a deep-seated kind of nervousness and like you said, it's not about up with women, down with men, up with this, down with, it's about creating a platform and an environment and making tweaks so that everybody has got an equal chance of success. This is about everyone thriving in businesses. This is about businesses thriving. This is about people being happy, productive in their work. But in order to do that, you need to make the platform the same level for people to kind of jump up to brilliance. And I think sometimes people just don't know what to do. They don't understand how to navigate this, and they're worried that they're going to get it wrong. Is kind of my gut feel on this kind of stuff, having spoken to many people in businesses.
Yeah. I would also say that even leading on from that, one of the things is probably the intentionality behind things. Some things you really do have to do with proper intention. And by that, I mean, like, you can't just say, oh, we hope to have more women in the engineering department, and then just go about your day, like not change anything, like how you're actually going out and hiring. Like, you just have the thought and then you carry on, like, and you expect the change. So I think the very, very beginning thing that people need to do for this to change is to have that intentionality, first of all. And like, like Gemma said, if it's something that you feel like, oh, I don't understand, I don't even know where to begin, how about you engage people that understand and people that know where to begin? We live in 2025. Like, there's no excuse for a lot of things anymore. You can't just say, oh, I didn't know, or I couldn't figure it out. Because if you really want to know, if you really want to figure it out, you can. Like, the resources are there, the people are there to be able to guide and coach and help you, to get where you need to get to. So I think it basically just boils down to, a lot of people don't have the intentions. They just want to say the right things, they just want to appear like they're doing the right things. But actually, you see the difference in those companies that make it very clear, this is what we do, this is what we want to do. We don't know how to do it. So where do we start? How do we get in somebody, first of all, that knows how to do that and to get us there? So I would say that's probably one of the reasons is, that lack of intentionality.
And I will probably take a you could say softer approach to that. And I will say, there are people, a lot of the people, leaders and people throughout organizations that will talk to merit and will say that we're open, we're inclusive. But the key is people should apply. This is the criteria, not necessarily understanding the barriers that might exist for women in most cases when we're talking about the inclusivity, though men as well, if you think of the example of the midwife. So people don't always understand the barriers that exist for others. I think that's key. There's the communication, and there's in line with what you said, Tarrah, there's the communication and the approach that they take to send out the message that this is open for everyone, and everyone's welcome, removing those barriers. There's also, I think, a key problem that more of organizations than not are very hierarchical in structure. So that means actually there's a competition, an unhealthy competition, and there is a concern. We could say, get over yourself to men that might feel you still want me to be the provider at home, but you're asking me to be on a level playing field with women or being led by them. So there is that structure within organizations that creates barriers as well. And I still remember when I was doing a master's, and it was focused around the fire service. And I remember going to a fire station and speaking at length for hours to this firefighter. And he was someone who was seen as resistant to change. And I remember he said, I'm open to work with anyone, regardless of gender, ethnicity, orientation, sexual orientation, or what how have you. But the key is need to know that I can trust the person. Now you could call it a cop out, but for him, he's going to places where his life is at risk, and he wants to know whoever he's going in with can be trusted. And to varying degrees, that issue of can the person be trusted? Can the person do this job? Comes to play.
Wow,
It's
that's
there's
a big one.
there's two things. So with Tara, when you were talking about what can organizations do, I agree with what you said totally. But I also think ask women, if we're talking about gender specifically, which we are today, what do the women in your organization want? So you kind of go, yes, bring in experts, as you say, there's no excuses. But the number of people that I speak to that are running businesses, and you say, how do the women feel who are menopausal age and are sort of hitting board level age at the same time? Or how are women feeling who are going, oh, I don't know, I think they're fine. And actually just ask them, do some research like you would with your customers. Employees are the biggest driver of your business. And if they're happy, your customers will be happy. So ask them how they feel. And I think, Susan, to your point on the kind of the barriers that exist, I was listening to a really interesting clip on LinkedIn the other day, and it was interviewing men with questions that had actually been asked to women. And Susan, I think you've seen it because you're laughing.
I have, yeah.
It was amazing. And it just proved, so the men were asked, they talked about their shoes when they came into the interview. Oh, I love your shoes. Where are they from? Or they said, do you think your looks had anything to do with your promotion? And these poor men were genuinely flummoxed and really confused and were like, I'm not sure how that has anything to do with the job that I do. And they kind of went through the whole interviews, and at the end they said these are actually questions that have been asked to women in leadership roles when they've gone for promotions. And it was hilarious, but you don't know the privilege of your lived experience until you have it shown to you. And that was a really kind of quite an immersive, quite maybe an extreme, I don't know, version of that. But it just makes you realize that the barriers are completely invisible to you, as you said, Susan, unless you've actually seen them, felt them, had someone in your family experience, like they have to be closer to home. So I think it was just a really visual example of, it's not them and us. Like we need to bring people closer. We need to bring people in.
And I did see that, and I remember I've seen it a few times, and I agree with you. And I will say ask women, but I will say ask men as well, because there is the assumption, like with the example of the firefighter, there's the assumption that he would have been against, as I said, against change and against people that are different. But men are quite diverse and have different points of view, and some are for, some are against. They have different levels of understanding of women in the workplace and the challenges and what to do to support them or not. And I believe if we ask women, we understand from women's perspective. But if we ask men, we also understand what they're thinking. We get them to think and we get them to engage, and we can then work together with them to be able to come to a space where they're included. Because if we just focus on women and asking women, which is understand that thinking, then it's like, what do women want in order to be able to come into a space, overcome the barriers, and what does everyone else have to do? But if we include men, and men with different levels of privilege as well, if we ask men as well, then they're part of the solution, and they're more likely to be accepting of women and other people that are different when they come into the space.
That's such an important correction.
I was going to say that's a perfect point to mention the fact that I did invite plenty of men to take part today. I think, yeah, it's really important that it's a collaborative decision, but that piece in terms of what companies can do and how they can play catch up, I think it's really important that you're able to measure where you're at. You're able to understand the status quo, but not only what it looks like, but why it's occurred. Yeah. So many organizations that we speak to through the accreditation process, and they say, you know, oh, we'd love to improve diversity in the team, but just doesn't happen. There was one organization that they were saying, you know, we really hemorrhage female talent and we don't know why. But it gets to a point and they all leave. And what became really clear through the process was that it wasn't supportive of people after they had a family. And so they had this kind of female talent dropping off the cliff and were scratching their heads. They didn't want it to happen. But it actually took that reflection and that measurement to understand and plot exactly where it was happening and why it was happening. Then speak to people and say, well, actually, what would be a more appropriate way of sustaining your career after you've had family or you've done whatever? And they went through that process, and lo and behold, their whole workforce is now so much different to when they started the process. But until you understand what you're working with and why you're working with, I think it's really hard. And I could go on for days. With the firefighter, I'm just really interested whether he finds, whether had that conversation explored further, whether he finds it easier to trust certain people, whether that trust is given more willingly to people that look and sound like him, and therefore, do women on his team or LGBTQ plus or whatever people, do they have to work harder for that trust? But that's probably a topic for another day. We'll be here for
yeah. I mean, and I think the logic is we trust people that we can relate to, that we see something in common with, if it's a common purpose, common values. When I first walked through the door, he was probably thinking, who's this? But when you get to know a person and you think, okay, that person is actually okay. So probably we can say it's not fair, but it's, I guess, the human nature of who I feel comfortable with, what's familiar to me, especially in a space, because it goes back to the midwife as well. So there is that starting point, and yes, there's more work that is needed for people to be familiar with others. And I think that's key to why conversations like this are important, why the dialogue with the firefighter and other people that seem resistant are important, so we can understand their perspective. I'm very much one of gently posing questions to people to make them think and become aware.
I was going to say, I'm a big fan of, I'm like me and my co-founder who's male, like we were laughing because I'm such a why person. Like I will just ask you why, like, well, why do you think that? Because I want to understand like the deepness behind people's decisions. I love the examples you guys have been giving, and that's why even with the firefighter, I would always keep probing to be like, okay, but what do you mean somebody you trust? Like, what is it about this person that you don't trust, but this person you do trust? I think questioning people in that way is actually what starts to make certain things pop in their head, to be like, actually, yeah, fair question. Why do I feel like I trust this person more than I trust this person? Like, what's actually the difference between the two? So yeah, I love that. And I think we need to keep having these conversations and keep questioning, keep asking to make that person give you an answer, because it's like, tell me why. I want to know, how do I improve if I don't know why I don't meet a certain standard in your eyes? So yeah, it's an interesting one.
And I would agree with that, in terms of the continuing to question and to probe, but to probe to get the person to think and come and become aware. There's, with International Women's Day and the focus on women this month, there's something whereby I've seen, like there's a campaign which is oi, to say to them, if you catch them doing something wrong, to say oi. I don't like that idea. I can understand it, but my preference is to say and lead to a pause that gets them to think. So and then you get a person's attention without the person pushing back and becoming defensive.
Interesting. We're almost out of time. I think we need to, there's so much there that I think we could go on for days. I think the conclusion that we've all reached is that diversity, whether it's gender or anything else, is good for business. You need to be doing it. And if as an organization you're not, and you're falling behind, and from an industry perspective, you need to start asking some questions of yourself. You need to measure and understand where your starting point is, and then enlist the help of some experts to really move that dial and keep things changing, so that you can be one of the businesses that are benefiting from this amazing diverse talent pool that's out there. So thank you, panel, to Gemma, to Susan, to Tarrah, especially with your dodgy mouth. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Really enjoyed it. I hope you listening at home or wherever you're listening have also enjoyed it too. We're going to be talking next week about some other things that constrict women's careers. So I hope you'll join us for that too. And yeah, thanks again, panel. We'll speak soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.